Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Guided Podcast. This week, we are back with Catherine Ann, our resident intuitive astrologer, who incorporates her background in tarot, channeling, and the healing arts in her uniquely guided approach to reading the messages in the stars. So, she is here this week to shed light on the upcoming new moon in Cancer that will be happening on July 5th. So, Catherine, welcome back. And why don't you just get right to it?
All right, great. So this new moon in Cancer is just going to be lovely. Very different energy than what we talked about last month with some things going on with Saturn and Capricorn. It's just beautiful. The moon loves to be in Cancer. That's its favorite place to be. And then Venus is still participating in this moon. So it's not sitting right on top of it like it was last month, but it's now moved into Cancer and it's participating. So it's lovely. So I think of Venus of like the goddess Aphrodite, beauty and harmony, and what we're like receiving of love and receiving of just everything that is harmonious is what I think of with Venus. So with the moon in Cancer in its favorite place and still playing with Venus, it's super happy. And I think we're all going to be feeling the love. So Venus in Cancer for this moon, Venus may have you wanting to beautify things. And Cancer really speaks to home, right? We've been talking about in the last lunation with Capricorn about that feeling of home. And in Capricorn, it was security and safety, but in Cancer, it's nurturing and mom's cooking and that cozy blanket that you had when you were a kid that you still kept with you, and or nostalgia and memories. It's that type of home and cozy. And then Venus is saying, let's just love up on all of this homeness. So I think it's going to be really beautiful. It's interesting. I just realized that it's just after the 4th of July here in the States, where a lot of people are probably going to be getting together with family. And so, and Venus is going to be there already. And I would anticipate people are going to really feel nostalgic and wanting to connect with people in that harmonious, homey feeling. So Saturn still is playing a part, but it's not a challenging thing anymore. It's in a nice aspect. It's called a trine, which is harmonious. And so now where Saturn plays a part is it's supporting all of this. It's that consistency, steadfastness to support what Venus is trying to do. So you're going to have kind of the strength, I guess, to maybe make some of these things happen that you're wanting to do. So as we remember, new moons are planting seeds of intention. And so you may have some new things that you want to bring in around these topics of home, around Cancer and Venus type of ideas.
So let me ask you a quick clarifying question, because a lot of times when we hear the word home, we think about our physical homes, our physical environment, and our spaces. But does this Venus energy also apply to the home that is our body and within ourselves? So would that also be looking at harmony within our our own inner world, our own inner environment, that kind of home, or just it's more physical in that sense?
So it definitely can be. And in a bit, when we're going to talk about how it's impacting some of the signs more, you'll see where it's more internal and where it's more actually home, right? But really, that saying, home is where the heart is. This really, Venus in Cancer with this new moon in Cancer really speaks to that phrase, home is where the heart is. So where are you feeling loved? Or are you loving on yourself to feel a sense of home? That's kind of what the home, it's not necessarily the physical home. Yeah, so that was a good question. So some other things, Venus, the reason why I really bring up Venus, because she's not necessarily directly on this moon. She's in the same sign, but she has a lot of aspects with other planets. So I feel like she's speaking really loudly because of how she's interacting. So she has this interaction with Uranus, which is electric and eccentric and breakthrough energy. So think about, so Uranus connecting with Venus. Venus is that beauty, and Uranus is excited, electric, break. So for some of you, you might all of a sudden get inspiration to get a new tattoo or change your hair because it's like, I'm going to do something different. This is beautiful to me. You know, grain of salt with that one, right? Because even though it's in a, nice flowing relationship with Uranus, it is still a little impulsive, unexpected, right? So if you do something that's a permanent change, be aware it's a permanent change. Right? Like adding a tattoo. But still, it's that fun, electric, beautifying connection. And then we also have another connection to Venus, which is actually a hard aspect. And this is really where I wanted to talk the most about today, because yes, we have this beautiful Cancer new moon where you're going to plant seeds that have to do with that feeling of safety and security and nurturing and wanting to start new phases surrounding that. But there's two things here. One, Cancer is represented by the crab. So, the crab carries its home everywhere with it, which is also kind of like home is where the heart is, right? But also that home for a crab is a hard shell. And we may want to consider that if we have new things we want to do, that they're not really ready to be shared with the world. Because in a Cancer new moon, we want to protect that seed and nurture it and let it grow before we throw it out to the world and, the crow's going to come eat it. We want to protect our exciting new idea. So, because remember, with a new moon, this isn't something that's necessarily coming to fruition. It's something we're starting. So keep that in mind as we talk about this next thing, because this is really the bulk of where I wanted to talk about this moon is it's beautiful, it's lovely, but there is a square from Venus to Chiron. So Venus, we've talked a lot about what that represents. Chiron is the wounded healer. Chiron is an asteroid, and it really represents, if you think about the mythology of Chiron, he was a teacher, he was a centaur, he was a teacher, and I'm not going to go into the whole story, but long story short, he is part God, and so he's immortal. And then through the process of the story, he takes a wound and he can't heal it. It's this wound because he has that immortal side. You would think he could heal it, but in the deal he made for the whole process of the story, I'm going to jump to the end. He can't heal this wound. And so it's this teacher, philosopher, like sage who lives with this wound that won't heal. And so I want to think about that in relationship to this Venus Chiron square, because square is that hard angle. It's obstacles, challenges. It's not an easy flow. So we have all this beautiful stuff happening, and then we have this hard situation going on with our own wound. There's a potential there for Chiron is in Aries. Aries is all about self, independence. I want to do me. I want to express myself. I want to be all I can be and do all I can do. That's Aries. And then Chiron is sitting there for us going, I actually have a wound around this. And so I'm going to give a couple examples of what that would look like. So a wound around self might be, I feel perpetually unworthy. I can't have this because I'm not worthy. I can't be in a relationship because I have this unworthiness. Another way it might show up is I have such a wound about needing to be myself that I'm not going to compromise myself for anyone, because it's like a chip on your shoulder, right? So it could go either way. It's like, I'm going to go big on all about me because I have a chip on my shoulder, or I'm not going to express who I fully am because I don't feel worthy, or I have some childhood wound that shut me down, that told me something's wrong with me. And so it can like affect your self-esteem. So with this moon in Cancer, having so much connection with Venus, I think it's important to note that there's also this trigger, this like this wound trigger that could come up. And the reason I think it's important to know that is, like we've talked about in the past, it's about the weather, right? So let's not let a trigger ruin the beauty of this moon.
Yeah.
And let's, you know, if something comes up, let's go, oh, woo, okay, that's something I'm going to need to explore. But I don't need to blow up whatever great time I'm having or whatever nice plan I'm going to have. I just need to be aware that this is an opportunity that's being shown to come up to be healed. Because
Yeah.
when we're talking about Chiron, this is a healing process. It's not, you're never ever going to get over your Chiron. There's something called a Chiron return when you're like 49, 50, where it comes back to where it was when you were born. And many people have gone through a healing journey. So once it moves past, you now get to kind of like teach people how you healed that and how you move through that. So I think this Venus square Chiron is a really great opportunity to say, oh, wow, I thought I had worked on that. Maybe I'm going to need to add that into my healing journey again.
So,
Right.
so everything you're talking about, I'm like, you're literally describing me and some of my wounding. And I want to understand for the other people listening, is this a wound? Like, I know for me, self-worth runs deep, and that is my life's work, is to really, unpack that wound, as is, right, making myself a focus or a priority in my own life, right? So my question for others who might be listening, is this a wound that we've been working on with maybe some sort of laser focus in the past year, couple of years? Is this like a core wound that we would point people to? Because I would consider self-worth, for me, that is a core wound. Or is there a way that does astrology help to articulate what that wound might be, that people could dive deeper in that way? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, great. All of the above. So I'm going to take it piece by piece. So, and if I forget something, just ask again. So, all of us were born, it's in our chart somewhere. It's not a super fast moving planet. So there's, big groups of people that have it in the same place. So I was born with Chiron in Aries. So Chiron currently is in Aries. And so if you look at just like the global energy, the weather, all of us are transversing this experience of Chiron and Aries, and then, how it's affecting our lives. But for me personally, because I was also born with Chiron and Aries, it's both. It's what the weather is, but it's also absolutely a core wound that's coming up to be healed. I'm very close to my Chiron return. It's very appropriate, right? So, so yes to both. And I love that you asked, is this something we've been working with? Because I'm sure anybody who's listening to astrology, or honestly in the United States, knew about the eclipses in April. I mean, it was mass migration to see the eclipse, right? It was a really big deal. So that happened in Aries and really closely connected to Chiron. So this eclipse that happened in April that foretells just significant changes in whatever kind of areas of your life that it points to, also was walking hand in hand with your wounds. Or the global wounds, right? So it's really interesting. I've heard a lot of astrologers who do mundane astrology, which is like global world astrology. They talk about how for the United States, since this solar eclipse was full, full blockage, full eclipse in the United States, and then this Chiron part about the United States really have to redefine who they are. and having to relook at principles of independence and freedom, and I need to be able to do me, really core belief systems in the United States, right? I mean, even what our Constitution was written on. And there's this eclipse going, this is changing. We need to look at this. And I don't do political astrology in any way, but it's I think clear that that's something that's going on, right? So if we take that down into our own personal lives, then we have been working with this Chiron situation for a little while, and it was really magnified with that eclipse in April. And so now it's coming again, and now it's talking to Venus, but it's cushioned in a softer energy. So it allows it to be a more internal situation, a more personal. Does it make sense?
It does. Yeah. So we could, I don't know if anybody listening keeps a journal, but I'm already thinking in my head, like, I need to go back to my journal from April and start looking through some of the things that I was working through. I have an idea of what those might be, but it's always fun to kind of look back to be like, oh, right, like this is coming around again, because our healing happens in levels and layers, right? And so it sounds like this is another level, another layer of healing these same issues, which is where what precipitated the initial question.
Yeah, exactly. And then so the kind of double whammy with this new moon is that Cancer is already very sensitive. So we are going to be kind of hypersensitive during this time, heightened intuition, just pros and cons of sensitivity. I'm not saying hypersensitive in a negative way, right? Like, we're going to be feelers because it's Cancer. So then if we have this poking, triggering aspect, that's where it's like, oh, that was a trigger. That wasn't just a like, wow, I'm super intuitive and super feely. It's, ooh, ouch. And being able to know that's okay. This is coming up on purpose for us to heal this and move past it. So there's a couple scenarios that I thought about with this. So imagine that it's going to that wherever Venus and the new moon is in your chart, it's in a place where you're like, I want to decorate my home, right? Like, I want to remodel it. I want to bring in some beautiful elements, maybe some soft touches because it's Cancer. I'm thinking, like, for me, that would be like candles and pretty pictures and, maybe some plants and getting it all beautified. And then somebody comes and goes, ugh, what'd you do to your house? Right? And you were excited. Maybe you had a little bit of that Uranus, that it was impulsive or electric, and you're like, I'm doing it now. And you got all excited and you love it. And the reality is you love it. It's not up for debate, right? Like, you did this because you were inspired, and that's what beautiful meant to you, or that's what harmony meant to you. And someone else poked at kind of like at the crab's underbelly.
I was just going to say the image I'm getting is like the crabs in the bucket. And when crabs are trying to get out of the bucket and they pull each other back down, that's what it feels like, crabs in the bucket.
Yep. Yep. And so as we walk through it, you'll see sometimes that's going to come from an outside source. Sometimes that's going to come from an internal rumination that you're having. But, it could be, I'll go back to the getting a tattoo, right? Because Uranus got you all excited and you're like, I'm just doing it. I'm going to be me. I don't even care. And then somebody has something to say about it, right? Or, as one of the things that we'll talk about later is, oh my goodness, did I make a huge mistake? Am I going to get fired because now I have this massive sleeve tattoo, right? Like, there's a something that goes, uh-oh, and triggers a worry or an anxiety or a hurt because you followed your Venus, right? You just followed this is beautiful and I love it and I want to do this. And then you get a little dagger. So, some of the things to think about are, when this comes up, is, oh, okay, I see I have more healing to do around this, right? Like, if it's your sibling that makes a snarky comment, a family picnic, and you're like, ooh, ooh, okay, yes, more work to do there. But don't let it ruin your fun, you know?
Yeah, it feels the energy feel as I feel into it, it feels very prickly. Like that's I keep seeing a cactus and it just feels prickly.
Yeah. So that's what's so interesting about this is because all the other energy is lovely. So it's not an entire prickle. It's the one barb of the cactus that gets you. And having that solid support from Saturn that says, it's okay. I'm okay. I'll get to it. Thanks for showing me that. Right. Yeah. I just heard like, thank you, Spirit, more, please. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I don't want more of this. I'll get to it. I'm not going to tuck it away. Right. But like,
It's
but
showing something for us to dive into. It's happening for us,
that's,
really looking at it from the lens of like, ooh, I feel the prick. So there's
mhm.
something here that's asking to be healed. So how am I going
Yeah.
to then go into it?
Yeah, but still enjoy the loveliness of the
Mm,
energy because there's going to be bigger, stronger energies in the weeks that follow. So, you can get to maybe some stronger energies later, but like enjoy this because it's beautiful. Um, and then the other thing I was thinking about that is that it's it is a prick of showing you something to be healed, but it's all related to your own self-expression and your own sense of independence. So, going back to the tattoo thing, someone makes a comment and you're like, I can be me. And that's that trigger, right? Like, I'm old enough to get a tattoo if I want to get a tattoo. I don't care what my aunt so and so said.
right.
That's the
But
trigger.
yeah, and as you say it, right, it's like we want to defend ourselves. We want to defend the decision. And it's almost like we've got to look at maybe where we feel righteous in or we act righteous because that's a righteousness is a defense of the ego, right? Like, so I think if we can catch where we are feeling like we need to be righteous or feeling like we need to defend our choices, why are we triggered? We're triggered that we feel defensive. It doesn't make it the wrong decision, but it's like, why do we feel like we need the approval or why do we feel right?
Yes, exactly. And so, um, it's not about the story, right? It's not about who did what to who. It's about, ooh, there's something for me that like that made me feel like I couldn't be myself. That made me feel like something that triggered my something's wrong with me core wound or
Mm,
those type of
yeah,
things. So, I actually really want to get into walking through the signs because I feel like I'm trying to give some examples, and this is really going to speak to it for people in a more specific way. So,
great.
just to preload this, so I'm going to be talking about for each sign, you can listen for your rising sign or your sun sign. And your rising sign is also called your ascendant, same thing. So if you know your rising or your ascendant, I would listen for that first. If you don't, that's fine. You can listen for your sun sign. It still applies. And then what I'm doing is I'm just looking at where are Venus and the new moon in people who have, these signs, and where is Chiron in Aries maybe going to trigger. And in some of this, I've done like the question to ask yourself as far as like, oh, this happened. Have I done the healing? Right. So we're actually going to start with Aries. And for Aries, if you are an Aries rising or an Aries sun, this new moon is happening in your fourth house, which is home. It's the bottom of your chart. It's your foundation. It's your lineage, your ancestry. It's what you grew up in, the family you grew up with. So with Venus and then Cancer there, you're going to want to go home. You're going to want to be around. I'm going to say you're going to want to be around the people you consider family, right? Because not everyone considers their childhood family, but you're going to want to feel family. You're going to feel nostalgia, connecting with home cooked meals and maybe old home movies and just like that feeling of being, that's funny, I just being back in the womb, right? Like you want to be cozy, you want to cozy up with home. And interestingly enough, where Chiron in Aries is in your first house. So this is big, loud wounds about you, who you are, how you show up in the world, how you express yourself out, how you want people to see you. And so you might go home and get a trigger about a comment about your body or your appearance or how you're being outgoing and loud, because it's not about what you're doing, it's about how you're being. And so, for our Aries and Aries rising, that it's kind of like the quintessential story about going home for the holidays and getting poked, right? That's for Aries. So if we move on to Taurus, and feel free to jump in if you have a question. But so if you move on to Taurus, first rising or sun, this is landing in your third house. So your third house is, well, they call it the junk drawer because it covers so much stuff. But it's the joy of the moon. She's very happy there. And it's also siblings and short trips. So one of the things that could happen is you decide to go on a little road trip to visit an aunt or an uncle or a sibling, because this third house is like extended family. So maybe you decide to go on a road trip. You're like, that'd be so fun. That's going to feel like home to me to go visit these people. And then kind of the same story, right? You go to visit family, you get that little poke. But this time, the poke isn't necessarily going to be directly about, oh, so you put on 15 pounds, huh? It's not going to be directly about your body or how you express yourself. It's going to be like this subconscious, hidden, deep type of wound because it's in your 12th house. So the question is, have you done enough spiritual growth, which is also a 12th house topic? Have you done enough spiritual growth and healing to not get triggered? And if you do get triggered, do you have some sort of practice or at the minimum, a way to take a break and recenter so that you don't go into some self-sabotaging habits? Because this is where self-undoing happens. So, have a great time, go visit, but, have your meditation on your on your phone so you can, close up in a room and take some breaths and then go back out and enjoy your family. If we move to Gemini, rising and sun, so the moon is going to show up in your second house of income and value and money and possessions. So Venus, I didn't talk about, also rules money. So Venus is going to say, ooh, I want that. That's pretty. That's nice. That's lovely. I need that. Right. And that's great. I mean, follow your Venus, right? Go for it. And where Chiron is in your 11th house of friends and networks and hopes and dreams and community, which is a nice positive place, you would think. However, where the poke might be is, what are my friends going to think about this? I like this. Are they really even my friends because they're criticizing me? Do I really even belong? The thought came up of like, am I just trying to keep up with the Jones? It's like there's this element of groups that triggers what you did, and by following your Venus. Okay, so let's move on to Cancer. So the new moon is in Cancer, which is lovely. It's in the house of you. And this is like, you got an I love mom tattoo. It's Cancer's all about mom and nurturing, and your first house is about your body and your appearance. And so you're like, oh yeah, I'm getting a new hairdo. I got my I love mom. Maybe I'm getting a new wardrobe. I'm going to go, to Home Depot or to some design space and spruce up my house because my house needs to express who I am. This is all about Venus is helping me express who I am. And then this was the one I was talking about and then you go, uh-oh, how is that going to impact my career, my reputation, my success, right? So if I go a little wacky and wild with my hairdo, and then I show up to work and they're like, so we don't allow rainbow colors and, something like that. You're going to go, ooh, but then you're like, but I gotta be me. So that's where that one is. So for Leo, for this moon is showing up in your 12th house. And so this 12th house is the house of retreat. It's your subconscious, it's going inward, it's hidden. And so for Leos, this is actually a time, not only because it's a new moon in Cancer, but because the sun is in Cancer, this is a time for retreat for Leos. You are just waiting, just fighting, just like nipping at the bit to have the sun go into Leo and to let you shine. You are ready, ready, ready. Leos love this, right? They love their time because they're ruled by the sun. But the month before is I need to go inward. I need to take a break. I need to maybe, fill your reserves because you are going to be out there during Leo time. So it's a time of going inward. And where this Chiron is showing up is this introspection. So this is where we're talking about, this isn't about someone else triggering you. This is about, am I on the right path? Am I really living a life that expresses me, who I am as an individual? So you might start thinking, maybe I need to have a deeper faith or spiritual practice. Maybe I need to change my faith. Maybe I need to travel the world or take on some new form of education to expand my experiences to make sure I'm really living the me I want to be living. Okay. So for Virgo, this is falling in your 11th house of friends and networks. And so with Cancer there, your friends are your family. You love them. You want to get them together. The bigger, the better. You might even, depending on how other things play out in your chart, you might want to host like a philanthropic event for women and children because Venus is all about women and children. And the 11th house is about that philanthropy and networking and groups. And you might just be like, I've got to put together something big because I want all my people together. And then that squares the 8th house with Chiron that says, what about debt? What about resources? What about, can I afford this? And also, so it's not only like, can I afford this? Should I be spending the money? Because it's not just about cash flow. It's about a deeper, like exchange, financial resources type of thing. But are you too proud to ask for help in funding the event? So it's kind of like that shadowy side of are you willing to go into debt for it? Or does debt trigger you? Right? Does debt, if you go into debt, does that tell you you're not worthy? Or does that tell you if I go into debt, I'll never be free and get to fly away because I'm gonna have to slave away to pay off this debt? But I really want to have this big event that maybe I can't fully afford. So it's that maybe you need to ask for a potluck. Everybody brings because you're looking for this wound around not asking for help from other people to contribute. Okay, so we're going to move on to Libra. So with Libra, with Cancer, you're going to always want your work environment to feel like home. So whether that means you work from home or your place of work is like your family and your home, so maybe you're like, I'm going to redecorate my office. I'm going to Venus up my office. I'm going to, make it beautiful and feel nurturing. And maybe you want to set a new intention around your profession to, maybe have a career space where your work environment feels like home, right? Because not everybody that's a Libra rising or Libra works in a place that they feel like home, but that may be the rub, right? So maybe you need to be setting the intention saying, I really would rather I would rather work from home, or I'd rather work in a place that feels like Venus. And so then what that squares with is your 7th house, which is your relationships and partnerships and marriage. And you might be a little sensitive to your partner's comments about this idea. Perfect situation to be the crab and keep your intentions inside that little shell so that seed has time to grow before someone shoots it down. And that doesn't mean your partner's doing anything wrong. It's because this wound is internal. This is about you. So they could literally say the sky is blue and you might think it's a criticism because you're super sensitive about this particular area, this particular choice, this something new that you want. So the other thing that could happen with that is your work getting in the way of your relationships? Are you gonna, like, you're not able to find a partnership because you focus so much on your work is home that, and you have this wound that is saying, I don't even think I want to bother with relationships. I feel at home at work. So now, mind you, as I'm saying this, I'm not talking about someone's natal chart in the sense of Chiron. I'm talking about what Chiron's energy is right now for everybody. So that may or may not be something that's a lifelong pattern for you. If you have Chiron and Aries natally, this is probably something that you battle with, that you may feel more comfortable at the workspace and it's getting into your ability to have a good relationship because that's an area where you have a wound. Okay, so we're going to move on to Scorpio. So Scorpio is going to have this new moon in their 9th house. So they're going to feel drawn towards doing something new that feeds their soul. If you know a Scorpio, I'm a Scorpio stellium. I don't like small talk. I want to go deep. If I can talk about anything that has to do with spirit and going deep, I'm there. So Scorpios are being drawn to go deep. And they're also maybe being drawn to travel to beautiful places, or maybe to study Venusian topics. Like maybe I want to go travel and see art around the world, or maybe I want to start a new course of study in art history. Or maybe it's time for me to up my game on my spiritual growth. This is what this new moon is asking Scorpio to do, or opening up for Scorpio. And where it's coming into that Chiron trigger is, but are you taking care of yourself? Are you going to sacrifice yourself out of obligations to others? Are you going to be sacrificing your daily routines, your healthcare, your personal well-being to do this? And remember, this is not a reality. This is a trigger. So I can't go because I have to do this for others. I can't explore because it's going to totally mess up my health routine. It's a trigger. It's not a truth. So that's something important to think about. So when we're talking about Sagittarius, the moon is going to be in their 8th house. We talked about that's debts and resources from others and taxes. But with the moon there, Venus, remember, also rules money. So you're actually really going to be thinking about your money. You're going to be thinking about your long-term investments. You're going to be thinking about, are you inheriting a home? Maybe not now, maybe in the future, but maybe that's going to be part of this, where you're going. And so the Chiron is in your 5th house of children, creativity, romance, and Sagittarius is, in general, fun, travel, outgoing. That's part of their nature. And this wound is showing up in a house that really speaks to who they are, with wanting to have fun, wanting to play, wanting to, experience life. And so when in this contrast with this financial piece that we talked about, or inheritance or debts, the wound might say to you, well, have I been focusing too much on fun and pleasure? And so my retirement is a shambles. Or have I been having too much fun and I didn't pay attention to the contracts I got into with people? And maybe, right? Because remember, this is the moon. Or is it just about balancing and setting some time to pay attention, setting that intention to make sure that I'm paying attention to these things, but I'm also not giving up this fun self-expression that is me? And then as we move on to Capricorn, this new moon is in the 7th house of relationships. So a lovely, lovely, lovely energy to attract partnership. Venus is there. The moon is super lovely there. And so it's a great time to bring in a new relationship or to plant a seed that you're ready for that. Or if you're already in a great relationship, to just love up that relationship. And this is the house of partnership and marriage, but it's also the house of like one-on-one partners or even your clients. So if you do some sort of work where you're serving people one-on-one, this is a beautiful time to set intentions for attracting more partners, attracting more clients, or really doing something that makes you feel connected with the clients that you have.
Yeah, and as you're saying this too, I also think about what about the relationship with yourself, right? If you've been working on having a more loving, compassionate relationship with yourself, which I'm a Capricorn, and of course that's been a focus for the last couple of years, but I that is what caught my attention in that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so where it's getting poked is in the fourth house. That Aries, that Chiron in Aries is in the fourth house. We talked about this before of like home and family and your ancestral lineage, your childhood home, your father. So it's your past, right? So what wounds are you carrying? Because this Aries in Chiron is in kind of like your childhood space or your ancestral lineage. What wounds are you carrying with you from your ancestors? What wounds are you carrying with you from something that happened to you in childhood that makes you feel like if you get into a relationship, you're going to lose yourself? You're going to lose your sense of independence. You're going to not be able to be free if you're tied down to a relationship. But again, that's not truth. That's an old pattern, an old childhood thing that is telling you you can't have this relationship because now you're going to be trapped.
I'm like, get out of my head. Like, don't
So,
fence me in. Yeah.
yeah, but plant this seed of intention in this new moon to attract in the perfect partner for who you are. And then that allows you to express yourself fully, that doesn't crimp your style. And that's going to be a great way to use that new moon energy in this and this Venus energy in that seventh house.
Yeah. So I love how you pulled all that together because my question to you is going to be, and you mentioned this for some of the signs, but really thinking about how do we best approach setting intentions, with all of these different energies. And I think you spoke to that really in the Capricorn description. But also I keep having this question come up around, we talked about, this gentleness and really beautiful energy that's juxtaposed by just a little prick, maybe a little trigger. And I keep flashing back to that tattoo example where we have an impulse, right, to maybe get a new tattoo or something. So my question is the energy really supporting kind of like just do it and that's from a heart based place, or is there an element to this energy that creates an impulsiveness that we would be well served to remind ourselves to take a pause before taking action?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the Uranus aspect that is making it that electric, exciting, eccentric, that's where the quickness comes from it. But it's not necessarily impulsiveness. It's almost like flash of lightning. Little bit of a difference, right? So it's also breakthroughs. It's that like lightning bolt. So maybe it's something you've been thinking for a while and you just go, oh, and you get that flash. That's what I'll like. That's what's going to feel good. And so that's where that impulse to get a tattoo. It's more about I've been wanting a tattoo for a year and oh my God, the image just came into my head and I'm doing it now. Right. But it does have that eccentric side to it. So it might be, something that someone else would comment on. But the other thing that I haven't talked about at all is that we do have a really nice relationship going on with Saturn and Mars where you're going to feel focused, disciplined, being able to take action in a determined and deliberate way. So it's such a great question because it's not the impulsive horse got out of the barn and ran with it, because you have this really supportive capacity to complete projects. It's a very determined output of energy with that little burst of like flash of lightning, download from spirit,
It's
excitement.
it's really interesting you say that. I want to say maybe a month or two ago, I got this message from Spirit that was wait to move forward until the idea literally smacks you over your head. And I feel like that's kind of what you're describing. And I'm like, ooh, maybe I'm finally going to get that smack. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect way to explain it, because that's a perfect way to explain the Saturn sextile Mars that we're talking about right now, because you're being deliberate, you're being consistent, you're waiting it out, but you're going to get bam, that flash of lightning with that Uranus. So that's a perfect way to describe it. So yeah, it's maybe unexpected, but not necessarily impulsive. Okay, so we just have two more I want to make sure I get, because they'll be sad if they get left out. So we have Aquarius, sun and rising. So the moon is falling into your sixth house, health, wellness, routines, even actually illness and work and pets. So what really came to me with this Venus new moon combination in there is maybe you're going to want a new beauty routine or a new health routine, something where you're really ready to give yourself some nurturing, right? Because this is Cancer, you want to nurture, but this is in the house of, I need to take care of my health and my work routine. Maybe I need to make some adjustments because I haven't been putting myself into the equation, especially in this sixth house. That's that often where we're doing for others at a sacrifice of our health and wellness. And so maybe it's time for me to really nurture me and plant those seeds of, I'm going to start yoga practice, or I'm going to just whatever makes you feel good, right? It doesn't have to be huge, but it also is something that's going to make you feel that Venusian beauty or harmony, right? This is going to bring more peace to my life. This is going to make me feel better, that like my appearance feels better, something like that. But the question is going to be, it's in the Chiron's in the third house, which again is the junk box. It's like it's everything and anything falls in there. But really it's your local environment, your neighborhood, and then your siblings, your extended family, maybe childhood friends from school. So whatever you're going to do, keep it to yourself, because like the nosy neighbor might have an opinion about it. Or your sibling might have an opinion about it. Especially if it's like you've been in a pattern where you've been kind of like sacrificing yourself for others, and now you're trying to do for yourself. Those people who have an opinion about it might be the ones that were benefiting from you sacrificing so much. And so now you're like, but I want to do this for me. So, do it, but keep it under wraps. You don't need any nosy neighbors giving their opinion. And if they do, remember to think about, are they saying this because by me doing this, they're losing something they've been gaining from our relationship? Or they have their own issues around this, and so they're projecting it onto me. And last but not least is Pisces. So for sun and rising Pisces, this is, my notes say yummy, yummy. Like this moon is in the fifth house of children and creativity and pleasure and romance and good fortune and just lovely, lovely, lovely house. And this beautiful moon with this beautiful Venus, just so yummy. Like really dive in, like don't let this pass you by. We don't always have these, right? Where we're just like, everything is so super yummy. Lean into pleasure. Lean into your creativity, lean into romance, lean into fun with your kids. Like just let it be a beautiful thing. Where it's coming into square is your second house of money and value. So you might say, can I really afford it? Is it really worth it? Right? Does this pleasure, creativity, this having a great time with your kids, is it really worth it? Should I really spend on this? Right? And that's where you have to look at, remember, this is a trigger point. Maybe you can afford it, or maybe you can do it in a way where you don't need to spend money, but it brings so much value. And maybe your trigger point is that you don't spend money on your pleasure. And this is an opportunity for you to say, this is worth it and I deserve it. And so I'm going to do it. And then that's it. That wraps us all up.
Thank you so much. I feel like that is so helpful to really hone in on how we can leverage all of these different energies. I'm excited to kind of go back and decide how I want to set my intentions for this new moon. And so, if you had to kind of sum up the main theme or takeaway for people from the energies of this new moon, what would you leave people with?
So I would say, I mentioned it a little bit at the beginning too. It's embrace comfort, embrace beauty, embrace self-nurturing, but know that if you get triggered, it's just something coming up to be healed, to allow for greater self-expression. That's
Beautiful.
in a nutshell.
Yeah. And this is how we can use astrology to really facilitate our growth, our ascension, our evolution. So I love that when we can take these astrological principles and really make them very tangible. So if people want to dive further into their chart, Catherine, where would you direct them for that?
So there's some free resources I've mentioned before. If you just want to put in all of your information to just get a printout, to find out what your rising sign is, to help you follow along with, any of these delineations, astro.com, astroseek, there's plenty of places you can go. But if you really want to have your chart pulled and just have someone walk you through it, I recommend getting a natal chart reading, because it's going to ground you in who you are, because any of the energies that are happening always reflect back to your natal chart, because that is your blueprint. And then everything else is how it's going to react for this. So one of the things that's really important to know about that, as I was saying before, I natally have Chiron and Aries. So for me, Chiron and Aries is really activating core wounds for me. That's not true for everybody. And that's going to make a difference depending on your chart. And so also it's going to help you kind of hone in, because the world of astrology is vast. And so at least knowing your natal placements and some of maybe your stronger planets, or some of the places where you get more edge, or where you get more triggered, that's going to help you understand what astrologers are saying when they're doing the horoscopes. And then beyond that, you can start applying, bigger themes and bigger transits, because your basic blueprint.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. As always, everyone, you can find Catherine Ann's energy information in the show notes on the podcast episode description. And we will look forward to chatting with Catherine again for the full moon later this month. Until next time, everybody.